Hey, everybody, it's Ryan. Thanks for downloading today's show. And just a reminder, as always, Wake Up War Chant is brought to you by our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central and Township, in the heart of College Town. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, from Tallahassee to Thomasville, and from coast to Atlantic coast, it's time to Wake Up War Chant here on 97.9 ESPN Radio. And it is a very happy Thursday morning, October 12th, to you and yours. You're currently listening to the voice of Ryan Kelly. I'm the director of digital media at warchant.com. It's good to have you along with us, and it's good to have Drew on the other side of the glass. Drew Hicken, of course, our producer. Drew, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm fine. That was a really fun night of baseball. We'll talk about that in a second, but listen, with as how Florida State football has been going, it's just been good to get enjoyment out of other sports. And it's just been fun to watch fun, good physical activity. And both of those games last night delivered. That was a great game that the Nats played with the Cubbies. That was a really great Game 5 between the Yankees and the Indians. And we'll get into that while you're sleeping. But it's just fun to talk about something positive in sports for a change. But anyway, we're going to get to a little bit of FSU stuff. Thanks so much for waking up with us here at 6 a.m. on 97.9 ESPN Radio, or, of course, streaming over your mobile device, the WTSM app, the TuneIn Radio app, ESPNTallahassee.com. However it is, we thank you so much. The podcast, you know how to get it. It's iTunes, Podcast Republic, WarChantRadio.com, YouTube, whenever, however. We thank you so much. And if you like the show, why don't you give us a nice little 5-star review there? Rate and subscribe. It helps us out, helps you out when you subscribe to the show as well. And then, of course, radio@warchant.com. That's where you can send your comments, your questions, your concerns. You can also send them to our Twitter account at WakeUpWarChant. You know we can't do this without our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central and Township, all right there in the heart of College Town. So here it is, Florida State and Duke. It's now time for us to really kind of shift our gears towards this game. And this is a game that, you know, as bad as things have gone for Florida State, Drew, if you had to pick right now, straight up, Florida State or Duke, I mean,
it's Florida State. I don't even have to think about it.
And that's the thing. And when you beat a team the way that Florida State has historically beat Duke, even in their leaner years, that's just kind of how you feel, especially considering Duke, after that hot start, going 4-0, they're kind of stumbling into this. But this is still going to be quite a proving point for a couple different cores with Florida State. And I think more than any, it's wide receiver. And our own Ira Schoffel wrote a story about that. And the idea that here you go for the second straight year, injuries, issues, whatever it is, has asked you to have a young wide receiving core with young pieces step up. Nyquan Murray is chief among them. And I know he's the one guy who's healthy and ready to go. But we'll get into DJ Matthews. We'll get into Tamari and Terry. We'll get into all that in a second. But first of all, Nyquan Murray is the guy that can be the linchpin to turn this thing around. Having one more threat at receiver, having a different style of threat at receiver than, of course, Keith Gavin, who isn't going to play on Saturday more than likely. Auden Tate, who, if he is playing on Saturday, is playing hurt as he can be and basically with one arm. Nyquan Murray is the guy that has to emerge and be consistent and be ready to roll for this Florida State team. And you know what? If he is, and you make other teams respect that guy, then maybe DJ Matthews, Tamari, and Terry, you can make their adjustment a little bit easier.
Yeah, and you know, another thing that I have a lot of confidence in moving forward is the running game. Hopefully you're only going up from here because you're not going to face another really good defensive line until you go up against Clemson. So hopefully you get a couple of weeks to really get things moving in the right direction. You saw a lot of things that you liked against Miami, against a front seven that you really felt like was going to bully Florida State's offensive line, and you were still able to get that run game going. And like you said, what you're really looking for from Nyquan Murray is a level of maturity that we just have not seen from him yet. A lot of questionable, a lot of questions about his effort and things of that nature. I really look for him to step up. You need him, and I look to see how Jimbo is going to get James Blackman going early. You've seen what he's done against NC State and against Wake. and against, well, not NC State because that was more earlier, but against Wake and against Miami late in the game. And you wonder where that is for the first 3 quarters of the football game. I look to see Jimbo get him going a little bit earlier in this football game.
Overall, for Florida State, finding offensive identity is key amongst all these things. And DJ Matthews is a guy, of course, my alma mater, TCA. I'm excited to see him for that. But I'm also excited to see him because you've heard such good things, and you've heard what he can do with the ball in his hands. And the fact that he is such a different type of wide receiver than what Florida State has, the fact that you finally have, when you get everyone healthy and when you get everyone together, a diverse group of wide receivers that can attack you in a bunch of different ways. If you can get DJ Matthew going and come up to speed, say you get him, say Auden Tate gets a little bit better, say Keith Gavin gets healthy, and Nooney Murray is able to kind of step up. And I know that's a lot of ifs I just said, but if those pieces can fall into place, that's a really good 4 in that wide receiver core.
Yeah, I think more than anything, and we talked about it a little bit yesterday, is how is this team going to respond mentally to that crushing blow against Miami? We've seen time and time again Miami fall apart after a loss to Florida State. How is this team going to respond after a loss to Miami? Something that we haven't dealt with in quite some time. And not even just a loss to Miami. It's a 1-3 start. You lose this game to Duke, you're in a full-blown free fall. You're 1-4. You just lost to Miami for the first time in 7 years. You just lost to Duke for the first time in school history. These are things that cannot happen. It would be inexplicable to lose this football game. I get that Duke is better and they're well coached, but there's a reason why this line opened at 1 and immediately jumped to 7. Florida State's the better football team. They have better athletes. I get it's at Duke, but I don't care. You should win this game by, I think 7 to 10 points at least.
And I think that's why this has been such a straightforward game to talk about this week, is because there are expectations of what has to be done, how you have to take care of business, and anything other than a win is unacceptable here. We got a good show for you today, ladies and gentlemen. Ira Schoffel is going to join us to play a little Renegade Express, do some questions and answers here in a bit. And then we got a chance to sit down with C.J. Walker, the sophomore guard for the Florida State basketball team. We get to talk a little bit hoops later on in this show. That's one of the opportunities that's afforded to you when the football team is 1-3 and you only have an hour show. But that being said, we got to get you caught up on a fantastic night of sports last night. Let's go. It's while you were sleeping.
Hello. Good morning.
Wake up! Wake up!
Wake me up.
Good morning. Good morning.
What happened last night?
There will be a Game 5, and it will be in our nation's capital as the Washington Nationals defeat the Chicago Cubbies 5-0 at Wrigley Field. It was a 1-0 game for most of this contest until finally a grand salami. Yeah, you heard me. A grand salami in the 8th inning by the Washington Nationals ends up putting this game over the top 5-0. 2 really good ball clubs, 2 really good pitching staffs. And honestly, this is probably as good of a Game 5 as you're going to ask for, Drew. That's just my thoughts. But it's going to be pretty hard to top the Game 5 that we saw last night. The Yankees defeat the Cleveland Indians 5-2, and the Indians continue being the bridesmaid of the MLB and are now that the Cubbies have won the World Series, they're that team. I know we kind of talked about it in that World Series last year, but they are that squad that just can't get it over the hump. It was a really good ball game. 3-2 for most of the back half of this game until a couple of just horrifically costly errors for the Indians in the 9th end up giving the Yankees a 2-run cushion.
Yeah, you really felt like the Indians had the pitching to be the first team to win 20-plus games and go on to win the World Series. Unfortunately, they have failed me and all of Mets Nation in allowing the Yankees to advance, and for that, I will never forgive them.
Well, they did all Tiger fans a favor by getting rid of the Cleveland Indians. The Yankees got rid of the Indians and the Twins in the matter of a week, and for that, Pinstripes, we thank you. When we come back, it's our own Ira Schoffel taking your questions as a part of the Renegade Express. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio. know the music. It means it's time for the Renegade Express. Got to get back in the habit because we missed it last week. There was just so much to get to with FSU Miami. But the managing editor of WarChant.com is on the other side of the phone line. He's Ira Schoffel. Ira, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Ryan. How are you?
I am just fine. And before we get to any other questions, I have to answer one question on my own. And that is this. Gator Hater on the FSU message boards wants to know, Ryan, are you related to Charles Kelly? No, not that I'm aware of. Charles is a great guy, despite the issues of what's going on right now. But no, to my knowledge, I am not related to him. I am not related to Brian Kelly. I am not related to Ryan Kelly of the Indianapolis Colts. I am not related to Ryan Kelly of the Los Angeles Lakers. I really don't think I'm related to any famous Kelly. So let's just clear the air right now. Despite my 1 hour of morning drive in Tallahassee, I might be the most famous Kelly in my actual family.
I like the Ryan Kelly basketball player. He's a pretty solid player.
Yeah. Remember that time he came back and he had been out for 6 months and came back and hung 30 on Carolina?
Yes, yeah, I do. He was pretty. I mean, he's one of those guys that you look at him and you're like, he's not really that good, and then you go, wow, he's really pretty good.
Yeah, Ryan Kelly kind of went down as that rare breed known as likable Duke white boy.
Yeah.
So, but anyway.
He was a good player, and then but of that group though, besides you, man, I'm gonna go Charles Kelly is the most likable of that group, and now he just got they got to put it together on the field.
Yeah, that's the thing about CK, and what's interesting about this whole situation is that and that's not to say the other guys aren't nice on that staff. I mean, we don't get to talk to him much, but I hate that it's with him because CK, every time we get to talk to him, seems like such a genuinely nice human.
Yeah, he definitely does, and not just with us. I mean, sometimes people put on airs for the media, but because they know it's going to affect how other people see them. But anybody you talk to in the athletic department always has nothing but great things to say about Charles Kelly.
All right, so Ira, to the actual questions, there's a lot of them this week. There's a couple of them coming from the Tribal Council. There's a couple coming from Twitter. So let's go ahead and get into these right now. And first of all, this one's the one that leaped out straight off the page at me. B4FSU2 on the Tribal Council. Is Jimbo's offense and perhaps defense too complex for our players? If so, why doesn't he simplify things? The only time things have worked out without failures in execution was 2013, and every other year we hear, well, someone missed a chip or this guy needs to squeeze this way, etc. In my opinion, the kids are thinking too much instead of going out there and letting their athletic ability dominate the way it should. Jimbo has taken the fun out of FSU football. I mean, that's a lot to process, but, there is so much talk about how complicated that offense is. And, I mean, even to an extent, that defense, and we've talked about it before, Ira, that, this is your third straight year where you're starting a new quarterback for a majority of your games. And when you have a very complicated offense and every year you have this quarterback turnover, granted, Florida State didn't expect to have it this year, but it's not helpful when you have guys continually having to learn a new offense and you continually having to adjust it to what they know, first of all, and second of all, to their skill set.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's a deep philosophical conversation. I mean, Jimbo, I mean, you could look at a lot of these spread offenses that are going around the country that are very simple. A lot of times it's one read. The quarterback really doesn't have that much to do in terms of, from a knowledge standpoint. A lot of times they go to the line of scrimmage, look to the sideline to get any audibles or checks. Then they run the play. A lot of times it's one read, maybe two reads at the most. On the flip side, those guys a lot of times are not prepared for the NFL. And you ask, well, why does that matter? Why do we care if the quarterback's prepared for the NFL? Well, you do because it helps in recruiting. Jameis Winston, a big reason Jameis Winston wanted to play for Jimbo Fisher is because he wanted to play in an offense that would help prepare him for the NFL. So the language, just being able to recite all of the verbiage that goes into calling a play at that level, those are the things that Jimbo prepares you for. So the positive to it is there's a couple positives to it. One is it's very attractive for recruits. FSU's signed a lot of blue-chip quarterbacks and receivers and running backs, partly a big part because of the offense Jimbo runs. And the other thing is when it works, like in 2013 and I think at different times with Christian Ponder, quarterback, when you have a quarterback who really gets it and the receivers and everybody's running it at a high level, it's much more dynamic and much more versatile than any of those other offenses. So if you're playing a team that's got great athletes, and you can switch your style, you can run it, you can throw it, you can do different things, whereas a spread offense might only have one speed or one thing that they're really proficient at. So, that's the reason why. But yeah, this is kind of the downside to it. And the trade-off is if you don't have quarterbacks who are prepared to handle it, you have to really scale back things and also the wide receivers. I mean, those two positions FSU is really inexperienced at this year, and I think you're seeing it from the offense. I don't think that's the big problem on defense, and I think they've really simplified things probably a little too much over the last year to where they play so much man that I think they become pretty predictable on defense, which is a whole different problem.
Our friend Philip on Twitter asks what almost works as a follow-up question here. Why is it that Jimbo still tends to manage games like he has the defense from 2013, such as not going for it on fourth down when he knows red zone struggles? And I think that could be answered kind of in two parts, but let's face it, it's one of the biggest criticisms of Coach Fisher has been, and I know a couple different folks have written about it and talked about it this week, and that the pace that Florida State plays on offense mixed with the, I guess, safeness that Florida State plays with on offense really doesn't completely play into the hands of the talent they have at the moment.
I think it depends on your perspective. I mean, I know a lot of people are saying that, but, you've got a true freshman quarterback, and I don't know that Jimbo wants to get into a game where you're running 70 or 80 plays. I don't know that he feels as good about his offense to get in a situation where you're increasing the number of plays and the number of possessions. That's one side of it. The other side of it is he is a defensive-minded offensive head coach. There's a reason Nick Saban loved Jimbo Fisher as offensive coordinator, and a big part of it is he's always looking out to protect his defense, to help his defense. And in those situations, like last week against Miami where it became a big topic, was he sees pinning them down inside the 10-yard line by punting from the 35 or the 40. He sees that when they're outside of field goal range. Jimbo sees that as, if I pin them back, I'm setting our defense up in great position to really control the game, and they did in the first half. I mean, there's a reason Miami had 60 yards of offense in the first half, and that was because they had terrible field position. FSU kept pinning them back, and Miami couldn't do a lot. They weren't going to take any chances because of where they were pinned back. So to Jimbo, I think that validates what he's doing. Other people would say, well, if you go for it and you punch in a touchdown, then you put pressure on the other team that way. But I don't know. I can see a little bit where he's coming from the standpoint of this red zone offense has been so poor that even if you get the first down and you get into the red zone, there's no guarantee you're going to get a touchdown then. So he's getting a lot of heat for that, but that's another philosophical thing that I'd be surprised if he changes anytime soon.
Cap TD63 wants to know, years ago our offensive line was much smaller and wasn't highly recruited, at least stars-wise. They weighed a lot less in the 270 to 280 range, but could open holes and were more physical. The offensive line we had the last couple years has more weight and is more highly rated as far as stars concerned, but can't block, nor are they physical. What seems to be the problem? Rick Trickett's a highly regarded coach, but his teaching methods don't seem to be working. What's the problem here? Well, first of all, thanks for the question. Second of all, it is curious to see, Florida State, Cap's right here. When Rick Trickett first came in, it was smaller, more athletic offensive linemen who could maybe do more from a physical standpoint. And then you saw that change over the years. Jimbo Fisher clearly kind of had an influence on Rick Trickett in terms of bigger bodies, bigger guys, more physically imposing linemen, and maybe a little bit less athleticism, but what you're trading for that is a little bit of weight and a little bit of power. And it seemed to work when it first happened, but now it kind of seems like you've turned around and you're almost going in a circle here with the same problems you had with that smaller line, now just with the bigger dudes.
Yeah, I think, if you talk to Rick Trickett back then, and if you talk to Jimbo about that topic, when they had smaller linemen, what they would say is, it's not like we want smaller linemen, but we're not going to sacrifice athleticism to get size. So, in other words, they like to do all that stretch zone running and things like that, where they get out and run. They want their linemen to get to the second level. So, they're not going to sacrifice that athleticism just to get some size. I think they feel like they've got guys who have a combination of both right now. When you talk about Landon Dickerson, I mean, by all accounts, he's going to be an NFL guy. I think Cole Minshew's probably not at that level of athleticism, but they've got a couple of other young guys, Josh Ball, Juan Williams, some of those guys that haven't really played as much yet that they are excited about, part of that class last year. So I think they think they're getting there. I don't think this team's problem right now, or this line's problem right now, is that they're too big. I think it's a knowledge thing. It's a lot of communication breakdowns, especially that Wake Forest game. That was the worst game they played by far. And that was a game, and the NC State game they struggled as well. But that was, again, I think that was one player who was so dominant that they didn't have an answer for and didn't do anything scheme-wise to take him away. But, for the most part, I think it's been assignments related more than it has been. They're just not quick enough to make the plays they need to make.
I get it. Duke Ejiofor is a really good talent. He's a guy who's going to be playing on Sundays, but you can't help but find that a little odd that Wake ended up being the game, considering the front sevens the Florida State's had to play and that offensive lines had to go against. It's still strange that Wake is kind of the game that they struggled the most.
Yeah, but again, I don't think that was physical. I mean, when Derek Kelly went out and they brought in Brock Rubel,
not
Brock
ideal.
Rubel he just was not ready. I mean, he got blown by the first few plays he was out there. Then they brought Josh Ball in. He wasn't ready. Then there was just like all kinds of crazy miscommunications. They just kind of totally fell apart mentally. Again, I don't know that it's as physical as the problem with this group. I think it's more mental and assignment related.
Finally, we have one more question for you, Ira, and it's from Andre, and he wants to know, basically, he wrote a lot of things about, why did the receivers and tight ends turn around to see where the running back is rather than just keep a body on their man, and it just boils down to this. Why does it seem like the wide receivers are so soft now, especially when Jimbo Fisher and blocking and things of that nature seem to be something that not too long ago Florida State hung their hat on of how good their wide receivers would block and how selflessly they played?
Yeah, I mean, again, you think about that team last year. I think Travis Rudolph was probably a better downfield blocker, and maybe Bobo Wilson. Some of those guys were better downfield blockers than people gave them credit for. This group has not been very good, clearly. I mean, Naquan Murray misses a lot of them. George Campbell's missed several of them. Auden Tate only has one shoulder. I mean, he's got the physicality the size to do it. He's only got one shoulder. Keith Gavin has struggled with it at times. Yeah, this group, I mean, and really, that affects you in so many ways. The bubble screen, but also affects you in the running game. I mean, how many times did, if those guys take care of their corners and their nickelbacks and people like that in coverage, blocking on those running plays, now, a Cam Akers or Jacquez Patrick, they may only have to deal with one safety in the open field. But if those receivers are not making their blocks, it kills you in the screen game, the bubble screens, but also kills you your chances of breaking a long run. So that's been a big problem. There's no doubt about it. I don't know if it's technique related. I don't know if it's want to. Again, we're not at practice anymore, so you don't get to see them doing those drills at all. But that is a big problem. There's no doubt. I mean, they have to block a lot better on the edges for this offense to really function.
And Ira, one more thought before we have to run, my friend, but isn't it amazing, and this is not a question from us, this is more a question from me, can you think of a wide receiver in Jimbo Fisher's era that came in with more hype and has been a bigger disappointment through the first half of the season than Nooney Murray?
Yeah, I mean, probably not. I mean, in terms of a guy 2 or 3 years into his career, probably not. I think that, there's been a couple times guys came in highly regarded and it didn't happen for him, or it took a long time to happen for him. But yeah, I mean, Naquan Murray, the way he played in the second half of last season, then in the spring, Jimbo said he was doing everything he could to become that number one wide receiver. And then now he's basically the third of that group when Keith Gavin and Auden Tate, if they're both healthy. And, last week he caught a few balls, but he's been really consistent. He had a big drop in that game. It's a problem, especially going into this week against Duke, because Jimbo said last night that Keith Gavin's probably not going to play. He's got that foot or ankle injury. Auden Tate is still banged up with the shoulder. George Campbell was questionable last week, ended up playing some. He only caught one pass, but he's still got some injury issues he's dealing with. And then beyond that, you got a lot of young guys, DJ Matthews and Tamarian Terry. Those guys are going to play some, but they really, if they ever could use Nyquan Murray to step up the way he did late last year in some of those big games like NC State, Michigan, they really could use it in these next few games.
I'm with you, Ira. Folks have to step up. Hey, thanks to your questions, everybody, and thanks to you, Ira, for taking some time to answer them.
Thanks, Ryan. Take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking a little bit of hoops after this. It's Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio.
Yes, Florida State just landed a 5-star commitment.
I don't see that anywhere online. How did you get that news so fast?
I'm on the new warchant.com app. I get news updates and scores pushed to my phone instantly.
How much does it cost?
It's free. Just go to iTunes or the Google Play Store, type in War Chant, and install it on your phone. That's it.
A free app that keeps me constantly up to date on Florida State sports and recruiting? Wow, that makes it incredibly easy to follow my Seminoles and never miss out.
With the app, you'll also get quick access to all the stories and features on War Chant, including the ever-popular message boards that feature thousands of fans talking about the Noles.
Warchant.com, your ultimate Seminole source.
Florida State basketball returning to practice for the 2017-2018 campaign. And, of course, a lot of new faces, a lot of old faces returning. One of those, of course, being C.J. Walker, who was really good as a freshman. Averaged about 12 and a half minutes a game. Shot about 40% from the floor. Good at about 30% from beyond the arc. Always respectable numbers. Good stuff. Gave you about 5 points, but the thing is, he was just a part of that crushing depth that Florida State had, and you're going to need more out of him this year. And God knows, of course, Florida State's definitely planning on having more out of him this year. I was able to catch up with C.J. Walker at the BTC yesterday, and here's what he had to say. First of all, CJ, thanks so much for joining us and talking with us. How's practice been going so far? I mean, pretty easy one right off the bat.
Yeah, practice been going good so far. We had 2 really good days. Our first practice was really good, just getting everybody into the system, everybody learning. So it's been going really well for our first practices so far.
And, you know, I find that kind of funny in that you are literally on the exact opposite side of where you were last year, where there was so much youth coming in, but there was some experience at the top. And now, how's it kind of been to kind of have that role reversal where now you're the guy just a year later?
It feels good, honestly, especially with the experience that we had last year. So it honestly feels good because I know the ropes. I know what Coach Ham wants. I know what the coaching staff wants. So it just makes it easier to pass it down to the freshmen. So it just makes it easier being the leader this year.
So I'm curious, now that you're the more experienced guy, you and Trent and all those guys, are you still the Boom Squad or are the young guys the Boom Squad? Or are you fighting over this title?
There's really no fight. We kind of started it, so I don't think there'll ever be a fight. But for us being the leaders, we trying to just have the freshmen or the incoming just kind of take that same mentality as we had, just doing what we have to do, just playing our role and just do what Coach Ham asks. So they can be like a Boom Squad junior. They can't never take over what we had, but they can try to do what we did, though. So,
hey, and it's always good just to have those numbers and that depth. And how encouraging is that just to know that based off what we've heard and what we've started to see, a lot of these guys look like they're going to be ready to make impacts day one.
Yeah, it feels really well. We just trying to get farther than we did last year, just trying to be more successful this year and just do the things that Coach Ham wants us to do. We trying to do this for Coach Ham as well. So, I mean, it just means a lot to know that we have depth again, be able to wear teams out and just be able to play at a fast pace for 1 through 15, whoever plays. So it just feels really good for our whole team to have the depth again.
You know, you mentioned that, of course, the offense has some new pieces, and, of course, the starting lineup's going to look a lot different. How has that offense progressed? I know you guys like to keep it freewheeling. You like to play it fast. How's it look so far through these first week or so?
It's been looking really well. We worked on it a lot this summer, just getting our terminology down, make sure the freshmen got a good understanding of it. Then when we went to Jamaica, that was pretty much a good thing, too, for them to learn. But it's going to be really good for our team this year. We're going to be able to score, be one of the top-scoring teams in the nation.
CJ, you personally – I like to ask this, especially of people going from year 1 to year 2. If you could tell yourself when you made it to Tallahassee a year ago, one thing that you know now that you didn't know then, what would you tell yourself?
I would just tell myself to just pace, think fast, but pace at the same time mentally, just be able to slow down, just be able to evaluate everything and just see everything, just not try to move so fast. the last year, that was probably one of the biggest things for me, just the transition, just being patient, just playing the way I play, just things like that. Just listen to the coaches, don't take things personal. So that's pretty much the biggest thing from year 2 to year 1.
And that's got to be, especially when there was so much hype going into last season and you guys were such a part of such a star-studded class, and plus the tempo that you guys played at, just being able to slow things down on and off the court, that's got to be one heck of a challenge, especially in college basketball where a career can be so condensed.
Yeah, most definitely, especially going to the tournament. Everything was just moving so fast, playing top 25 teams, 5 games in a row. It was just moving so fast, but you have to think about it slow, but you have to play fast at the same time. So that was just the biggest thing. So now going into this year 2, I pretty know what to expect, how to handle things, handle different situations, and just be able to do what Coach Ham wants me to do on the floor and off the floor.
You personally, what are you looking to get out of this season compared to last year? Where are you looking to grow the most?
I just want to gain respect again. Last year we didn't get much respect, so just to gain more respect than we had last year. Just to go further in the tournament. I mean, nobody wants to lose second round, so I just want to get further in the tournament and just be able to lead my team and be that leader and just be able to do the things, like I said, that Coach Hams want me to do as a point guard and just be a leader for this team.
You know, you mentioned it. Sometimes at Florida State it can be easy just because there are so many teams in the ACC and there are so many names that people have to throw around and throw about. Do you guys sometimes kind of relish being that underdog in the conference?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. It does a lot for us. It gives us confidence, fuel to the fire, basically. Nobody really wants to talk about Florida State, so we kind of want to put ourselves out there. So we go even harder in practice, use that as motivation just to go into practice in games this season.
CJ, the freshman, what can we expect to see from some of these guys? What can we expect to see from some of these, just, I guess, fresh faces?
Fresh faces, they're all willing to learn. They all play hard. They go hard in practice every day. They can shoot the ball really well on the perimeter. They're very smart, talented, athletic, so they're going to be really good. They're going to make a huge impact for us this year, be starting or coming off the bench, so they're just going to be really good for us this year.
I got to ask, is MJ Walker's shot every bit as good as they say it is?
Yeah, MJ, he can really shoot the ball. MJ's a really good shooter.
So between MJ Walker and CJ Walker, how many times have you guys gotten mixed up in the locker room?
We haven't got mixed up too many times. They pretty much know who we are. Just the Walker's going to be different things for the crowd or the announcers here and there. I think we might get mixed up a few times this year, but so far we ain't got mixed up that bad.
For you and Trent and some of these guys who are now in year 2 in this leadership role, how's it been really kind of clicking with this team? Because one of the things that was very, very clear last year is you guys love to play with each other, and you guys love to hang out, and, I mean, just seeing you guys on social media and stuff like that. It was a very close, tight-knit team. How do you replicate that chemistry with so many new, fresh faces coming in again?
Well, our fresh faces, they pretty much came in that way already, especially going through recruiting. We stayed in contact while they were recruiting, so it was pretty much knew what we expected from them as soon as they walked in the building, especially for Terrence. Chris been here 3 years, veteran player, so they passed that down as well. So they knew what we expected. Coaches told them what we expected, so it's just been kind of easy for them just to settle in. So we pretty much going to be the same tight-knit team as we had last year.
CJ, Jam with Ham, Friday night, Tully Gym, 80s night this year. 70s last year. I like the shirts this year, too. I really liked last year's, but I think I might like this year's better. I like the gold. But what do you hope when people make it out to Tully on Friday night they see out of you guys?
Just see that we're ready for the season. We're well prepared. We've been in practices. We're going to be really prepared for the season and just want to put on a show for the fans and just give them a reason to come to our games this year and just put on a show for them just to have fun as well.
CJ, know you got to run. Know you got to head to practice, but thanks so much for taking a couple minutes with us.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
So all sorts of interesting stuff. First of all, thanks to CJ for taking a little time before practice to chit-chat with us. And this is such a fascinating year for Florida State basketball because I think Hamilton is pushing the right button there in saying that, you know, we're a team that nobody's talking about, and we're a team that's really, really quiet. And, I mean, granted, you lost a lottery pick. You lost a second-round pick. Say what you want about XRM, he's going to be on a roster with the New York Knicks. You lost 3 guys who are going to be playing in the NBA this year. I understand why people are out of that, and I understand as blue chip and elite as at least 2 of those 3 guys were, why people are sleeping on you. But MJ Walker is a star. There are some guys here, Ike Obiagu, Wyatt Wilkes, they can plug in and they can play some meaningful pieces. I think what you're going to see for Florida State basketball this year, I think they're probably a tournament team. They're probably a team that finishes about somewhere in the 7th to 9th range in the ACC, that maybe sweating it on Selection Sunday, but certainly a team that has the pieces to get back in a tournament, but maybe more akin to those teams that made that 4-year run in the tournament under Leonard Hamilton than what you've seen over the last couple of years. Now, offensively, that's not going to be the case. Offensively, they're still going to push pace. They're going to run, and heck, you heard C.J. Walker talk about that. But it's certainly going to be maybe more of a team effort from Florida State this year rather than you need this superstar to do this every night. And don't get me wrong, you're going to need points out of M.J. Walker because he's going to be a one-and-done, and he's going to be a fun player to watch. But overall, this is going to be much more of a team effort rather than Dwayne Bacon wants the ball X number of times, X wants the ball X number of times, and John Isaac needs to shoot the ball more X number of times.
I'm also really interested to see how Terrence Mann develops into this year.
Absolutely.
We talked about it a lot last year. You saw flashes of how good of a player he could be and the leaps and bounds he'd already made. And if he continues to do that, really excited to see what we're going to see out of him this year. Now, look, I know last year was a disappointing finish. We all talked about it ad nauseum. But still, we have to acknowledge that was a special year for Florida State basketball. That's just not necessarily what you're going to get every year. I don't expect that this year. I agree with you. I think that, a 7 to 10 seed in the tournament is about what you should expect. I think the team's, probably good for at least one big upset, but don't expect us to rattle off, go 5-1 against the likes of Louisville, Duke, North Carolina, and all that junk all over again. It'll be a good basketball team, but not the same as last year.
Oh, no. This is a team that's definitely, I would say, if you're finishing around 500 in the ACC, especially considering you've been given a murderer's row of a schedule again, you're going to be just fine with that. I mean, heck, here's how you open conference play. Duke at Duke, North Carolina at home, Miami at Miami, Louisville at home, Syracuse at home. That is as brutal of 5 games to start as you had last year. And fingers crossed, and, you thank your lucky stars that you missed Notre Dame on that schedule till later on, February 10th, and they're not a part of that run because, of course, you saw later on, outside of that game they played at the Tuck, Notre Dame really had Florida State's number last year.
Yeah, and honestly, the concerning thing when you look at the start of that ACC schedule is it's pretty conceivable to think that you could start 0-5. Now, I would like to think that maybe you could beat Syracuse and steal another game from one of the...
You should maybe take that game in Coral Gables. Is the one that I would look at and say, if you're going to steal one here, maybe that. And then again, who knows what Louisville's going to be because of all the turmoil going around that program.
Right. I kind of completely forgot that it happened, to be honest with you. So that's a good point. Like I said, maybe steal one of those games and maybe, I don't know what Miami's looking like this year. I'm sure they're par of the course, whatever they normally are. Syracuse, obviously had a little bit of an off year last year. Hopefully, maybe they're still down a little bit. The ACC is a tough conference. We all know it. It is what it is, and we'll just have to wait and see how this team performs.
Overall, for Florida State, though, I think I think it's a reasonable expectation with the recruiting, with the depth you're going to have, even if you don't have those superstars up top. Just making it to the dance is a reasonable expectation for this team, and especially because of the consistent depth that you brought in again. And I think that's good news for Florida State, that regardless, getting back to the tournament is an expectation again. After a couple years of really kind of taking a break from that, this is a benchmark must-do for this program.
Yeah, I fully agree, especially with all the heat that was kind of on Leonard last year, which a lot of us acknowledged was totally unfair. At the end of the day, that was a great season. Leonard also he's got this thing going in the right direction. You feel like we're trending back upwards. He recruits really well. And who are you going to go out there that was going to get somebody? Who are you going to get that was better? I just think why we talked about why we shouldn't just wipe the slate clean when you've already have all these building blocks in place. I do think it's big for Leonard and for this program to kind of establish itself again as a tournament type team, not just a team that makes it once every few years. So I agree. I think just getting in the dance would be big for this team.
And overall, here's the thing, and you heard it from C.J. Walker in that interview, talking a little bit about, talking for Coach Ham and playing for Coach Ham, putting the team, kind of showing that he can be that guy. I mean, and listen, Leonard did deserve some flack for that final game. Chris Mack and Xavier did coach circles around that staff. It was clear who was more prepared. It was clear who was better ready to play, and Florida State just did not have an answer for Xavier's ball movement. But that being said, for the time being, for what Florida State is and for what can happen here at the time, Leonard Hamilton's the perfect guy in this situation. And I think it's something to be said that his players are willing to come out here preseason after they literally made the second round of the NCAA, are ready to come out here and say at a program like Florida State, they're willing to play for their coach. And I think that's a marvelous thing when you talk about the unity and how together this team is. And it kind of seems like that's going to translate from last year, that this team seems like it's another tight-knit group that wants to play together. And that's good news. We're putting a bow on it after this, ladies and gentlemen. It's Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio. The way they are in Florida State football, as we put a bow on at Wake Up War Chant 97.9 ESPN Radio. And speaking of Florida State football, if you're looking for a good place to watch that game on Saturday, our friends at For the Table have you hooked up with three incredible places, obviously, there in the heart of College Town. Madison Social, Central, Township. They're all right there. They're all a great time. Make sure you're going out there. If you've got nowhere else to go watch the Noles, go watch it with a bunch of fellow Florida State fans at the hottest spot in town. But as I was saying, with Florida State football kind of going the way it did, the Tigers season going the way it did, I mean, the Ducks are chock full of injuries to start this season. I found myself saying something I don't think I've said in a very long time, and you're probably going to agree with me, Drew. I thought to myself yesterday, at least I've got the Jaguars.
Yeah, that's right. I was thinking that the other day, that I never thought that I would see a time where my Sundays were better than my Saturdays. And really, so far, it's been like that. I mean, granted, the Jags are kind of an every other week kind of thing, but at least they're giving me something. They're giving me some life. We're in sole possession of first place. Leonard Fournette, he's just a wrecking ball. Best back in the league. Just kidding.
Man, when he called that dude over, on Sunday and said, come get you some of this, didn't he just squeal a little bit? Didn't he just go,
This Jaguars team has a swagger and a confidence about them that I have not seen out of a Jaguars team in God knows how long. I love it. I love watching them play. And even granted it was the Jets game, but at least it was competitive. It's none of those typical snoozer Jags fest that you're used to watching. Really interested to see if they can take the next step though this week when they play the Rams. Hopefully string together a couple of wins.
That's a good team and a fun team in Los Angeles too, by the way, that has turned it around really, really quick. It's almost like Jeff Fisher doesn't know what he's doing. And I hate to be the homer here. You want to know a big reason why that Jags defense has that attitude? They have these two guys named Jalen Ramsey and Telvin Smith, and they do a lot to do that. They're a lot of fun.
I mean, in all seriousness, you could make an argument right now that Jalen Ramsey, he might be a top 3 cornerback in the league right now.
He might be the best corner in the league right now.
He might be. I would. There's probably a couple I'd put ahead of him, but it's close. You could make the argument. He has played unbelievably so far this year.
The good news for Florida State is, as much as your arch rival loves to tout themselves as DBU, Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Rhodes, in my mind, for easy money, are 2 of the 3 best corners in the league. And that's saying something. A lot of good stuff today. We got to put a bow on it. We got to send it out to Mike and Mike. But my thanks to CJ Walker. My thanks to Ira Schoffel. My thanks to you, Drew.
Thank you.
And my thanks to you guys for listening. Mike and Mike's up next, 97.9 ESPN Radio. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
WarChant.com is the ultimate inside source for FSU football and recruiting. And now you can get in on the action for free for an entire month. WarChant.com is offering a risk-free 30-day trial subscription. Get full access to the #1 website covering the Seminoles just by entering the promo code WarChant30. That's WarChant30. Sign up and get in on the world's most active FSU message boards. Receive breaking news, stories from our award-winning staff, plus get exclusive interviews and videos. Just enter the promo code WarChant30. WarChant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.